Hello and welcome to the Board Game Barrage podcast for the 300th episode of the Board Game Barrage podcast, a podcast about board games, the latest hotness, and how to have fun with your friends, even when you're losing. It is 2024. Mark and Neilan, say hello to you at 300.
Hello, me at 300. Is this like a time capsule type thing? Do we send it back to episode 1?
Oh, we don't know. Absolutely not. Don't even look at episode 1. We're removing it from the archive. Don't even think about episode 1. We are back from the holidays. How are we all doing? We had a Christmas.
Yeah, pretty good. Good to be back in the U.S. Yeah.
Well, we're going to talk about our goals. No, cut it. They don't want to know about how much weight I need to lose. Cut it. Today on the show, we are going to look back at some promises we made each other last year. And we are going to look forward at things we're excited about, things we're committed to for board games in 2024, and also hopes for the podcast. If there was ever a time to navel gaze, it would be every episode for me. And it would be every 300 episodes for Mark and Neilan, where we will give a brief note on where we think we're at with the podcast. No spoilers. We'll get there. But before we do that, we'll talk about the games that we played. Mark is going to give us a mouthful of Orichalcum. I will follow that up with Mino Dice. And Neilan will keep it clean with Last Light. Mark, Orichalcum.
Orichalcum. So, I got a chance to play Orichalcum. This is a game that came out a couple years ago, and that, unbeknownst to me, or unremembered by me, Neilan has already reviewed. So, if you want to hear a lesser review, go back to episode 252 for that. So, it came out a couple years ago. Bruno Cathala and Johannes Guppy. Cathala, obviously a titan of game design, designing games like Mr. Jack and Jamaica, Five Tribes, King Domino, among others. If you want to hear more about Mr. Cathala, feel free to check out our Designer Spotlight episode on him back in episode 266. I'm not as familiar with Mr. Guppy's work, though he appears to have a number of titles under his belt as well. Anyway, Orichalcum promises to be a super quick 4X game. For those who don't know, these are games that encourage you to explore, expand, exploit, and exterminate. And as such, tend to be fairly aggressive area control-y sorts of games in general. I will say if you're looking for that sort of fighty style game, right off the bat, I can say that you're probably not going to find what you're looking for with Orichalcum. The other half of that promise, the idea that it's going to be a quick game, does prove to be quite true on the other hand. The way the game works, on your turn, you're going to be drafting a card that corresponds to one of the 4 different actions you can take in the game. Along with that card will come a randomized tile that you're going to place on your personal map board. So you draft the card, you do the action associated with the card. Again, one of only 4 that are available. And then you place your tile on your board and you're done. Now, obviously, turns aren't that fast, but in most cases, they're pretty close. That's because 2 of the 4 actions, just generate one of the 2 currencies in the game based on how many spots you have on your board that produce them. So, for example, if you take the produce Orichalcum action, you check out how many spots you have on your board that produce the Orichalcum, and you...
Mark.
Yes.
Mark.
Yes.
I'm going to let you finish, but do you hear the sentence you've just said? Are you playing a board game, and you're like, if you take the produce Orichalcum action...
Okay, yeah. Is that the craziest action in board games? I would say probably not.
I just want you to feel what you just said.
I feel it. Believe me. I feel it every time that an Orichalcum is always difficult to get through, and yet I'm a trooper. I'm
all right. Keep going if you feel good about that.
All right.
I wouldn't feel good about that.
Clearly. So if you take the producing the resource we're not going to be naming, if you take that action, you check to see how many spots you have that produce it, and you just get it. You get that many pieces. If you take the produce a hoplite action, which are your little troops, same thing. See how many spots on your board, make the hoplites, and you get them. And so in those cases, your turn is literally often done in under a minute. You're just seeing how many spots you produce and just get those resources. The other 2 actions are a little more complicated, but not much. There's a build action that allows you to either build one of the rule-breaking buildings that are available, or convert 5, I've got to say it here, Orichalcum for 1 victory point, or place a temple, which also scores you a victory point. So those are the 3 options for the build action. The final action is the fighting monsters action, which allows you to fight monsters that you'll potentially have acquired when you draft those cards. Fighting monsters is based on dice rolling, where you have to hit the number printed on the monster to beat it. But you can sort of supplement that action by adding dice, by spending the hoplite soldiers to fight them, and you get an extra die for every one you add. And if you roll any skulls, every die has a skull on one face. That's an auto victory. So with some investment, your chances to defeat these monsters are usually pretty good. Speaking of victories, let's talk about the interesting victory condition of Orichalcum. It is a game where it's first to 5 points. As long as you've cleared all your monsters, that is. First to 5 points wins immediately. Game immediately ends. There are, again, 3 ways to score points, 2 of which I've already mentioned, converting 5 of the O things to a victory point, or building a temple. The way you build a temple is have 4 different types of terrain adjacent to each other, basically, but those are 2 main sources of victory points. The final way to score victory points is by summoning a Titan, which has to do with, again, the terrain building that I've been mentioning. When you place 3 of a single type of terrain together, you get a Titan on your board, which both acts as a victory point, but also gives you a one-time power you can use. The thing is, if anyone ever puts together 3 or more of that type of terrain later in the game, and it's not really a hard thing to do, they immediately take that Titan, and you can never have more than one on your board. So it's a very temporary point in your race to get 5 points. So as quick as the game is, and as quick as your turns are, one of the sort of down notes for me on this game is the upkeep. So turns really whip around the table, but after everybody's taken their turn, there is a fairly cumbersome upkeep process where you're adding cards to the array that you're going to be drafting from, and you're going to be adding buildings, and there's a little bit of an upkeep there that sort of feels like it drags an otherwise really quick game down a little bit. But there's a lot that I like quite a bit about Orichalcum. I love how quick it is. I love the fact that it's a race game, a race to 5. That's always fun. I even like the way that the combat works. I haven't mentioned it, but there is an aspect to turn order where whoever has the biggest army, the biggest amount of hoplites under their control, they get first player. And in a game that's a race to 5 points, that can be a crucial aspect to it. So there's a ton I like. The rule set, as you might have guessed from the way I'm describing the game, is quite clear and quite light. And the game in general is quite light, but that's not necessarily usually a turn-off for me. And so this feels like a meal, a whole that is composed of a lot of things that I really like, but the resulting dish, the final product, this game, I can't help but say that it left me cold. Everything worked together well. Everything is well constructed. The game is sound completely, but I don't know if it's the fact that it does go by so quick. I don't know if it's the fact that it does feel so well calibrated that it felt like maybe a little too well calibrated, all the edges had been sanded off, and goes hand in hand with how quickly the turns whip around. In terms of your selecting what action you're going to do, it didn't really feel that tense to me. Usually you'll find an action that'll work for you, I think in most cases. But for whatever reason, a game where all the ingredients I really, really like, in the end, just sort of landed with a thud. Everybody had an okay time, but nobody that I played with was really interested in playing it again. It immediately went to my happily for trade pile. It was sort of just an interesting situation where reading about the game and seeing all these things that I really liked really got me excited, and then at the end just feeling it just didn't feel like I had really done anything. I wonder if that is because, for as good as a game going really quickly or having a short playtime is, maybe I didn't feel like it had enough space to really feel like there were interesting long-term decision making. I'm not really sure. I know, Neilan, you obviously played it before and reviewed it and had a much more positive experience, right?
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me a lot of Cathala games that I like, which is, funnily enough, some of the reasons that you're pointing out as things that maybe didn't work as well for you. It is smooth. It does feel like all the pieces fit together really well. I think it's easy for these types of games to feel like a disjointed set of systems, but in this case, I kind of felt like they all mesh and they came together really, really well. I found, for example, just the fact of turn order being decided by the number of hoplites you have to be very competitive in the games of this I played. Because there's a little twist to this that will maybe please Kellen, which is that if someone hits 5 points, the game ends immediately. So that turn order bidding is crucial. If you get first place on the last critical round of the game and get to those 5 points, game is over.
Keep talking to me, Neilan.
But I found that and while I did like that tempo consideration, and how like sort of jived with how quick the game is and the fact that it's a race. I didn't think that it was that important for most of the game. Like once you get towards the end, if people are vying for first place, yeah, it becomes critically important at that point. But for the most part, for example, early in the game, I was never in the running for being first place, but I benefited because the rule is whoever gets the first place, the person to their right gets an extra hoplite as compensation for going last. And like that was fine. And maybe that's an interesting consideration to make, like, oh, I don't want to win this because I want to get that free hoplite. Maybe, but I didn't feel like the interesting aspect of that jumping for turn order came into effect as often as I would have liked.
Yeah, it's possible, and it's like I remember my experience being different because the thing that is the trade off in that game is spending hoplites is action efficiency, right? So there is that trade off. Like, do I take the action now at the cost of losing first place? And I remember that being a good consideration. But again, we're talking about a very light, quick game.
Yes,
ultimately.
That's true. Yeah.
I think that for the space it was playing in, I was very pleasantly surprised by it.
And I think that's probably the right call. Like, I think the most damning indictment I could probably make of this game, and it is an indictment that I do make, to be clear, is that it is just, for me, meh. You know, like, it's not bad, and it's like 45 minutes, probably max, unless you have, like, playing like 4 players, maybe it'll go longer. So it's not going to take that long of a time, and everything works together. It's finely crafted. But for me, it just felt a little, again, just maybe like too sterile, for lack of a better term. But, you know, again, your mileage may vary. Neilan liked it, but yeah. And so that is Orichalcum by Bruno Cathala and Johannes Gopi.
Cathala has got to be up there with the strangest up, down, and, you know, confusing. Like, what do you peg him for? With, I'm just going through his like most well ranked: 7 Wonders Duel, 5 Tribes, Cyclades,
very
King
diverse
Domino.
designs.
Yeah.
Like no game quite like the other,
for sure.
And they also feel there's always some mechanisms in them. You're like, what? Like this is happening?
Right.
I would try this. You know, they build it as a 4X, but
it is not that. I think it should be very much points out it is not a 4X
Do
game.
not go into it with the 4X. Neilan fights me on this a little bit, but I think it is fairly multiplayer solitaire. There's a couple aspects that are not.
Is it triple X? Because that would be a turn on.
That's true. That's how they should have built it.
Which X do you not like, gentlemen? I had a chance, and I have been playing a quite good. I won't bury the lead. Imagine playing a trick-taking game. Okay, Mark? Imagine you get your hand of cards, except those cards are dice, and you have to bid on how many tricks you think you can win before you roll your dice in the hand of a trick. What would you say to that?
I would say
Mark?
that's crazy. I wouldn't say anything because my head would have been blown. My brain would have exploded out of my skull.
Yeah, you're confused right now, but let me explain it to you. Mino Dice, or maybe Mino Dice. I hope it's not Mino Dice because that would lower my ranking by at least 1. Mino Dice is for all intents and purposes, intensive purposes? Intents and purposes?
Intense
Who could
and
say?
purposes. Who can?
No,
Who could
I
say
don't know.
no?
Intents and purposes?
Yeah.
No, it's intensive
Who could
purposes,
say on
Neilan.
this one?
Purposes are intensive.
Well, my purposes, thanks for noticing. Mino Dice is a dice game distillation of Skull King. And Skull King, I don't want to relitigate, is a stolen product from Wizard, which is a stolen product from Oh Hell. But essentially, imagine a trick-taking game, but there are only like 8 types of dice. No, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 types of dice. And so, Mark, you in the second hand are getting 2 dice, and you get a purple dice and a yellow dice. And the distribution for those is very specific. So the yellow dice has 5, 5, 4, 4, 3, 3. The purple dice has 3, 3, 2, 2, and 1, 1. And you don't know what any other color dice that people have, but there are, 4 different kinds of just dice with numbers on them, distributions, and then 3 special dice, mermaids, griffins, and the minotaur that sort of beat everything else. And then you have to announce how many tricks you're going to win, and you have to get it right on in order to score points. and then a round will start, and someone will roll a dice into the arena, and that distribution on the best die in the game, the Minotaur, is 4 Minotaurs. So 4, you, I win, and 2, I give up, I lose. So it's so good. It really has been just a delight. This is like totally, I'm having a party and we're playing trick-taking games. Again, we can talk about what constitutes a party. Can you have a decrypto party? Only if you're boring. I would contend that Mino Dice is a party for in the same vein of Sea of Strife. So there's sort of this range, and I've been arguing with people about Wizard versus Skull King, and so on the spectrum, Wizard has a lot of control, less control than other games because there's special cards in it. Skull King has less control, and Mino Dice has even less control. But everyone knows that it's and stupid, and that's the sweet spot where everyone is just dying of laughing because you're just like, you're praying that the Minotaur rolls a Minotaur, and then there is one die that can beat the Minotaur, which again is very similar to Skull King. And so it's topsy-turvy, you're rolling dice. It should not work. It should not work that you could play a trick-taking game where you're just rolling dice. I found it absolutely a delight. I loved it. It's like an easy 8, 9 out of 10 for me. Could, like, if I had played it 5 or 6 times, I could see it taking Seas of Strife, which I just put on my top 50. I'm not there yet. Not there yet. Don't quote me. I also, for what it's worth, have not eaten any food. Okay? Let me just be honest. For 48 hours, 12 minutes, and 37 seconds.
Uh-huh. Is that like coloring your impression of Mino Dice? Like, have you?
No. Okay. I played that fully fed. Food in the stomach, fully fed, but it might be having a minor impact on my ability to form sentences. Okay. You be the judge. What do you guys think about Mino Dice?
I love it personally,
but you have not.
No, I haven't. I would like to play it.
Okay. So wait, was this your copy or was this?
Yes.
Because I'm curious because you have said, and we're not going to rehash this, that you're not the biggest fan of Skull King, especially in relation to Wizard, but you're fine with it. You're fine with it. Okay.
Yeah.
But what made you seek out Skull King, the dice game? Like, I would not have thought.
No. Don't say that word. I didn't know that it was Skull King, the dice game, when I played it.
Okay.
And
to be clear,
during the rules, someone was like, "Are you sure that's how it works?" Because in Skull King, it worked. And I said, "Shut the f up."
Were they right?
They were right. Yeah.
But this is a hard question to ask you. But like, what % of this is skill? Like, are we talking like a 25%? Or
no.
Like, okay.
North. Go north.
Oh, go north.
Go north.
50% skill. You think this is like, will this most skillful player will win? How would they? I guess you're predicting your tricks, right? So there's something there.
Wait a minute. Alternate name for this game is Skull King Das Werferspiel.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
It was published as Skull King the Dice Game?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
No, it wasn't.
What have you done?
Retraction. Oh my God, here's a cover box for this. Retraction. I thought this was Asian indie.
No.
Grandpa Beck got me. Oh my God. No, listen, I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah.
But I do think there is like room for this level of like silliness in this genre.
I agree.
It's like the Tournament at Camelot of Avalon and those games. Like it's funny and fun.
Yeah.
And I would say that it takes more skill than not. I wouldn't say it's like literally just like Daft Punk here. I would say that there's like actually something going on.
Yeah. Okay. And to be clear, I can see how it would be fun for sure. Like the dice rolling sounds awesome. Like the roll your dice at the center of the table and try to win this trick or lose this trick and all this stuff does sound
exactly. Fun. And it's a moment of you procure the die you need, and there's a groan from the table, that you have the right die that you need, but then you still have to get it. And so there's this dual moment. I think it's like excellent, quite good. Really like Mino Dice. Excited. We'll definitely have it in the bag at like a Dice Tower West, like no question. And one I look forward to playing more of. All right. We are going to turn it over to Neilan, pious Neilan, to talk to us about Last Light.
So, I'm not sure why I'm pious, but I will accept it. Last Light is a game by Roy Kennedy and Grey Fox Games. It is billed as a 4X game in an hour. And I was shocked to discover that it like more or less succeeds at that. Like our first game of this took an hour and 15 minutes, which is mad impressive if you're familiar with how long our first games of anything tends to take.
Can you tell him what else was mad impressive?
Kellen won.
Yeah, boy.
and you know, for a game that playing in that length of time, it does hit the marks of 4X at least to some appreciable degree. More so than Orichalcum, that's for sure. So let's talk about what Last Light is on the surface, what a 4X game is, and generally speaking. This is a space-themed game where your objective is to start in one corner of the space map, build up ships, travel across space, lay down extractors, get resources, build more ships, fight other players, and eventually turn all of that into light. It is at its heart a pretty simple race game, which is to say that at the end of any round where some player has 20 light, the game is over, and whoever has the most light wins. The one twist on this that makes it pretty different from other 4X games, and I think absolutely is what lends it its speed, is it is largely simultaneous play. So what you're going to be doing on any given round of the game is picking one card in your hand, which are going to be various actions. And those are all your typical sorts of 4X space game actions. So there's a card for researching, which is how you get new technology, which might be how you upgrade your ships, get yourself new passives, that sort of thing. There's a card for building ships. There's a card for building extractors. There's a card for getting the resources from those extractors, which will depend on which planet they're on, determines the resource that you get from that planet. There's a card for initiating movement in combat. This is the one action in the game that does become resolved in turn order, which makes sense. If going by start play, you move your ships around, you resolve any attacks you have. Which makes it pretty different from a lot of these games in that sense, is that if you play your attack card, you are strictly dealing damage. You are not initiating combats in the hexes you're in. The competing player would have had to play their attack card to deal damage back to you. So a lot of that all still resolves very quickly, even though it's not necessarily simultaneous in that case. And then finally, similar to something like a Concordia, you have a refresh card, which is how you get all of those other action cards back. At the end of any given round, if everyone has played all of their refreshes, there's sort of like a cleanup phase where everyone gets their refresh cards back. The board rotates because the board is made up of these alternating discs that sort of rotate in alternating directions, which kind of do a whole lot to accomplish two great things, which I thought was a delight. They muddle up the board in an interesting way, so it kind of means that you're never a fixed distance from any player's territory, depending on where your ships are, and they just absolutely sow chaos. You had a ship on your corner of the board, well, at the end of this round, you are now deep in Kellen's territory. You are suddenly surrounded by his ships in a way that is actually, it was funny every time it happened, because you would look at the resolving board and just be like, wait, what is this map? Suddenly everything just felt very chaotic.
It's like a mini reset. You know, if you ever get stuck in a game of like Twilight Imperium because your neighbor's here is mad at you for this, your neighbor over there is mad, the board rotates and you're like, oh, I've got new opportunities and new neighbors to screw around with, in a way that felt really refreshing for the genre.
Totally, because the thing that absolutely solves, like you said, from those longer form games is that stagnation, where you kind of feel like one person is stuck in just one sector of the map and holed up. This absolutely just prevents that from happening. It gets everyone into the mix very, very quickly. I was very impressed by the fact that this worked as well as it did. I did have a lot of problems with it, though. And I think that the heart of that is that this doesn't actually satisfy my itch for this style of 4X game. And some of that is kind of because, you know, even though it is very much representing the looser trappings of the genre, it doesn't have that epic feel that 4X games tend to have. And I do think that there's a property of their length. Like the fact that Eclipse goes on for 3 to 4 hours kind of lends us this feel of you building up your troops and moving across the map and slowly infringing on Kellen's space. This starts to feel sillier as a result. Not in a bad way, just in a different way. In a way that just kind of feels a little bit more chaotic, a little bit more like you will be in each other's faces very, very quickly. And by the nature of simultaneous play, you know, this is the same sort of thing that Gods of Atlantis has. It's very hard to necessarily react appropriately to another player's actions because you don't know what they're going to do on any given round by the time you've decided what you're going to be doing. So there's just a little bit of best laid plans baked into the structure of the game going awry, which again I thought was delight for the game that as it's trying to be, but not necessarily capturing what I personally am looking for from the genre. Kellen, I want to jump to your thoughts on this because I think you had a much better time with it than I did.
Yeah, I think there's some things to be really excited about here. Like, one, again, is the length, which we've gone to. Two, the simultaneous play does a ton to just keep everything moving and not feeling like there's a ton of downtime. And I think we need more simultaneous play. I found that the game actually ended right around the time that it was starting to get stupid, which I find to be a good thing. You know, people are building powers, expanding here, and right as everything was about to sort of break, so to speak, the game ended. And so it had a sense of tempo and pace that I liked. I think that you were like, I don't know if I'm going to keep this. And I'm like, well, you can ship it over to Kellen's house. I'll walk out of here with it if that's what we're doing. I'm ready to walk out of here with these boxes. I think that my problems with it are probably different than yours. I don't know that I've ever had a good game that I like a lot with the card system of play all your cards, then refresh. It really railroads what you can do, and it sort of becomes like, well, everyone's going to research and then move and then expand. It's just the order in which you do it that makes you different from your neighbor. And I'm like, well, that's stupid. But again, people love this. And, I have said this is just a rondelle by another name in other games. And I feel like Guards of Atlantis 2 might be the only one that has like pierced the veil, so to speak, for me of getting over that. I just don't find it interesting. And then also the production of this is like a gaudy monstrosity of mixed medium, cardboard, plastic, marbles atop of plastic, and I don't like it. I love the illustrations. Love them. Really, really impressed by the illustrations. But for whatever reason, I don't know that it congeals into a whole for me, but I liked the game. I would play the game again. I would have fun sitting in on it at a convention. I think it solves some things that it sets out to do, and I applaud its existence. Get shorter, add simultaneous play. I think this is a great space to be playing in.
100% agree with all of that. So a couple of things on the production, I'm absolutely with you. And that kind of also lends itself to, I think, to setup and teardown problems a little bit, which sometimes feels like the combination of setup, rules, and teardown could be longer than the game itself, which is interesting. But yes, I do think
call that Wonderland's War.
I do think that the mix of materials and the way that the board looks versus how the planets look versus how the ships look versus how the cards look is very much like a art direction mess, and that's unfortunate because I do think it has table presence. It certainly has that feeling of anyone walking past this at a convention would stop to see what it is, which I'm sure has done it no shortage of favors in the lead up to its release. But as a piece, as like a visual piece, I kind of feel like it lacks a lot. So that's a bit of a bummer. I like this. Like Kellen, I would like to see more people looking at this as a design challenge almost and get those game lengths down. Like, I'm 100% with you. We don't have to be in the 4-hour space for this genre. And I think Lost Light absolutely proves that.
And it's like, Epic. I think the thing that I still think about board games the most is like that they should be the least long to evoke what they want to experience. And if Epic Space Battle is what you're looking for, like what actually would be the least length that you'd accept that would pass your barometer for like epic feeling, right? Like the answer would be different for everyone.
Totally.
Of course.
And that's, I think, the irony of Lost Light in general is I actually think it would be probably closer to 2 hours. If you had the 2-hour version of this, I think it would just feel like that is enough to feel like a substantive length without it feeling like it's over before you can get anywhere with it. And I think Last Light, it's like a step in the right direction by oversteering a little bit, but I would like to see someone get on the version that's like somewhere between this and Eclipse, you know?
And Mark, just to paint a picture for you, right? Imagine Neilan and I are two kids learning how to ride a bike, okay? Neilan, by the end of the game, is in the middle of the road with training wheels still on his bike. And I lapped this guy like 20 times. So may that color your impression, Neilan, of Last Light.
I do really want to play this at Dice Tower West, though. I think the four of us would have a great time with it.
And just to be clear, we never like games more or less because of how we do on them. That's absolute garbage. But
it is interesting, though, how your opinion of the game seemed to change over the arc of it, though, Kellen, like as you were getting closer to winning.
I was winning the entire time. People looked up and I had 11 light, and they're like, did someone read the rules wrong? No. I know how to win. Get in, acquire light, get out.
Perfect.
Quick question, perhaps related to the fact that Kellen won. One thing that I have been hearing about Last Light is that some people have said, I've not played it, so I do not know, that it feels maybe a little imbalanced. Did you get the sense of that at all?
So the source of imbalance for this would be twofold. It would be that there are factions, but the faction powers feel pretty minor in the grand scheme of things relative to like the chaos of the game. But the larger source of imbalance is probably the same problems that this genre has, which is, hey, what planets are near you? What tokens are on them? What are you getting as the rewards from exploring versus other players? I still feel like it's still pretty minor relative to the general chaos of the game.
I actually struggled with this in the beginning of the game and was grumbling at Neilan for some sort of scythe-like. You know, he had a planet that he was able to get to that we shared only because his first technology card was, like, better than mine. And it was, like, clearly a race to get to this planet, and he just drew a good technology card, and I drew a bad one. And that was, like, pretty frustrating. I think it's hard because in order to accomplish a game where you can draw cool ship upgrades, there has to be a variety to those ship upgrades. And, like, I wouldn't want them to be entirely balanced, quote unquote. I don't really think that is even possible.
Yeah.
So it's a weird, I don't know. It's a good question.
It trades it off by having you be able to draw a lot of those, right? There's always a bonus to pick up. There's always a planet to explore. There's always a tech to get. So that balance is just shifting constantly around the table. That's the best I could say to that. But that is Last Light by Grey Fox Games.
Before we get to the episode, we did just want to remind people about our Patreon community. If you want Board Game Barrage episodes every week instead of every other week, you can subscribe to our Patreon at boardgamebarrage.com/Patreon or patreon.com/boardgamebarrage. See what we did there? In those episodes, we talk about video games, TV, movies, things we've been doing, things that annoy us, things that Kellen does that annoy us. And we also talk a little bit more openly about board games in some capacity, a little peek behind the curtain, politically correct. You would also get access to Patreon channels on the Discord where you can ask really direct and inciting. What is inciting?
Creating chaos.
Oh, yes. Inciting questions that we will answer.
Also insightful.
Yes. Yeah, the most insightful questions come from patrons. They're really the best people I've ever met or known, and that includes my parents. So you can check that out. We don't like to call it out that often, but we do have it. We're so grateful to people who subscribe to the Patreon. It does mean the world to us and allow us to attend conventions, buy new equipment. I still have a better microphone than Mark and Neilan, but that is due to my pride. Let us move on to our episode. And today we wanted to look back just a little, even though we never do, at things we said we would do in 2023 related to board games, things we're going to do in 2024 related to board games, and a reflection on BGB, given that we have made it to 300 episodes. That is the amount of years. Let's not get to the navel gazing. Let's start with recounting, a rehashing, did you accomplish the things that you set out to do? Thus saith us from last year, 2023. Mark.
Yeah.
You had a lot I just listened to this today, so I was in a time capsule. You had a lot of goals. They were all BG stat related. This and that, H index. You want it up.
I like
you
to
want
have
it down.
my goals in black and white. I don't like to have wishy-washy, oh, I sort of did it, or like these like...
Okay. So
I like to have mine readily achievable, black and white. Clearly, did I make it? Did I not?
put
I want
up
I
and
want
shut up.
grades.
Did you make it?
That's right. So, speaking of patrons,
What?
patrons-
What is this wishy washy? Did
Well,
you make it?
Well, no, here's the thing. Patrons will know that I had a whole bonus episode devoted to a comprehensive look at all of my BG stats challenges and whether or not I succeeded in them. I will not go through the entire thing here, but I will say that I had a mixed bag. I will say that some of the ones that I was most happy about accomplishing was the H index. For people who don't know what that means, is it's the idea of playing a certain number of games a certain number of times, and that's your number. So if you played throughout the course of your life 6 games each 6 times and no more, then your H index is 6. And in order to get to 7, you would have to play 7 games 7 times, and so on and so forth. I can't remember what my number was. I think it might have been like 27 at the time, and I wanted to push that up, meaning go from playing 27 games 27 times to 28 games 28 times. I'm now at 31. So that's a hard sort of number to move up, and I was able to move that up.
Mark, the H index is a bad goal. And I'm
Okay, why is that?
surprised you must have cut out when I told you last year that it was a bad goal. Because
can you remind me why you believe it's a bad goal?
Thank you for asking. It's it's like a sunk cost fallacy, right? Because
What?
in order to increase your H index, you now have a list of 30 games that you have to play. Like, you're gonna be stuck in the past, my dude. Like, do you understand
I have
the
so many
future?
counters to this. I have so many counters.
No,
to
you
this.
don't.
The biggest counter.
I didn't hear any of them. I just re-listened to it.
The first counter is you are assuming that I care about this way more than I do. Like,
Well,
this
you-
is something that I'm. No, but
Wait,
I like
your
that it
counter
moved
is
up, but
I don't care about this, bro?
I don't care about it as much as perhaps having even an H index that you are considering makes it out to be. Like,
Neilan, do you
I
have
like
an
that it
H
went
index?
up. But
I mean, I've never calculated mine. Couldn't tell you.
the other things are. Did you want to expound on that, Neilan?
No.
Okay. Great. Perfect. Let me keep going. The other thing is, this is saying that I'm playing games that I already like more times. I'm not putting a game on here that I hate, but I'm going to suffer through it to boost this number up. No, this is among my most favorite games. These are games that I obviously don't mind playing over and over again. And it's just encouraging me to play games more times, which is something that I think in general we sort of appreciate on the show rather than like being cult of the newie.
Neilan,
Right?
when your 10-year-old daughter watches Frozen for the 47th time, what would you say to her? What would you say to her, Neilan?
I can't not just say let it go. I'm sorry.
Oh,
I'm
Neilan.
so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Oh, Neilan. Not even for the bit you wouldn't humor me.
The listeners will not have known this, but Neilan did struggle saying that. I could see the pain in his face, but he knew he had to say it. But yeah, no, so I mean that's the main thing. Like in a culture, in a board game culture of play a game once, get rid of it, move on to the next. I think this is a good way to encourage repeated plays and being able to enjoy games that have staying power more than you normally would. But my other goals were related to like trying to play like 10 games that were published every year, like 10 different games published from like 2000 on. I missed a lot of those goals, but those are more like trying to keep my eyes open to like playing games that maybe I would not necessarily have played, like keeping an eye out for older games. So that did encourage me to play some older games. So that was good. My other goals were like related to playing games with you guys or playing games with locals here that I met in Vegas. So, I mean, they seemed like all beneficial. I have absolutely no regrets on having any of them. I have, if anything, redoubled my challenges for 2024. So there will be a similar review come this time next year where we'll see how high my H index goes in a year's time.
Did you say what your H index was?
It is currently 31.
31.
now. Yeah.
See if you could ever have an H index bigger than Mark's. I would say he has the biggest H index I've ever seen, and that includes my parents. What do you got for us, Neilan?
Yeah, so like the unfortunate come down to Mark's impressive feat is I have not really made any meaningful progress on my resolution for last year. So what it was to take all the board games around my apartment, cull effectively and get them into the shelves in my room. And I'm embarrassed to say that I've done next to none of that. If anything, the problem's gotten worse. That said, one thing I did notice on listening back to the episode was I just listed 50 games in, what would have been the next Strategicon. And this time around, I have just listed 100 games in the Strategicon with the sole purpose of cutting them and selling them. So there's like a much more effective culling theoretically, like whether any of that goes through. I am planning on just giving away near most of them and just basically bargain bin prices for everything else. So I am very much adamant about just taking those 100 games and getting rid of them in whatever way that means. And then, then the process of healing can begin. I can start to move stuff onto my shelves. That's the plan. That's the plan. For reals this time. 2024.
Do you have some, and this is a real question, sense of anything when someone new enters your house with the amount of games that you have? You have a very lovely place, but there are we could submit 4 photos of this room, that room.
Yeah.
It's oh, that structure is being held up by board games.
Yeah.
That bookshelf is supposed to be for books, but has board games.
Yeah.
Does that make you sheepish?
Yeah.
At all? I'm not trying to be mean at all.
It 100% does. And the thing is, some of it, came from, it always comes from a place of I can think right now to 4 distinct places that games are in my house, and they all served different purposes at some point, which is to say that I'll put a game here to remind myself that this is a game that I want to play actively in the coming weeks, and then that becomes a pile, and then that happens with everywhere the games are. I'll put this game on the floor here just because I know I'm going to put it into my bag for the next board game meetup, and then that floor space becomes a pile. So it's just the slow accumulation of stuff that just I've not made the concerted effort to fight at any point. But yeah, there is absolutely a sense of, oh yeah, come see my board game room, but please ignore the fact that board games are literally on the floor and on every table and every cupboard. It's just a mess of things. Come into my lounge and then please ignore the fact that there are board games in this corner over here. And it is definitely a point of frustration. It would be very, very easy for me to take all of those board games and shove them into the one room, but that wouldn't really be addressing the problem in any meaningful way. But yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of shoving things into a room, my board game resolution, as it were, last year, I read a list of over 90 board games, and I said by December 31st, I would have either played or culled every game on the list. And then I proceeded to read the list, and let me tell you, it was a little annoying. Christina tried to stop me, and she probably should have. But I will say that I have gone back, I have looked at the list, and I would say that I have about a 90 to 95% compliance rate, which is to say that I probably played about 10 of these in a best case scenario, and I got rid of about 70 to 80 of these. And there are a few that I am still holding on to that I know I will get played, like a Study in Emerald first edition. How the hell has that not happened? Mm-hmm. And I can't get rid of that. But I did reorganize my entire collection at the end of the year. I am now down to 292 games, and I have the entire thing logged in BGG, owned or not owned.
Yeah, joining the log crew.
Crew? I misspoke.
Log
not
crew?
Logged. Not logged. That's not a log. That's a...
You said it was a log. You said you logged them in. I'm hearing log crew.
I will not be on a log crew with you. And I think that having that sort of managed, I now have a little intake shelf that Mark and Neilan can't see because all they can see is clothes in a dresser that's been broken for over a year. The intake shelf are the games that have not been intaked, including one, Battle for Rokugan, which Mr. Neilan unfortunately accidentally gifted to me without realizing how valuable it is, and my copy of Shikoku 1889 and some new Dominion expansions. So those are every game I have is now on 2 5x5 calyxes, except for the games that are being intaked. And this isn't even my goal for the episode, but my goal is that if they don't fit, you gotta ship, or if they fit, get them out of the. You understand?
Yeah,
I think you get it. But, it doesn't take over my life because board games aren't my life. I'm a complete person. So I can post a list of compliance for those who wish to look at it. I think the coolest thing that came out of this was some hits, some big hits like Tower of Babel was on the list. Babel. They sort of became a Dice Tower West thing last year that we had a good time with. I feel like it rejuvenated that game. But a couple other big misses for me, like Spots, don't care for it. You're a Penguin, don't care for it. Magic Calligraphy, so funny but expensive, and there it is. Reputation, not good. The designer of Scout, not good. Anyway, we don't need to list them, because if you let me, I'll just start listing them. But why don't we move on to a single goal that we have, or goal or thought starter as it relates to board games in the year of the 2024, which I believe is the year of the dragon.
Is it really?
You're speechless.
I am speechless. Is it the Year of the Dragon?
Yes.
I don't believe you.
It's the year of the wood dragon, actually. It's a unique combination that brings excitement and noteworthy developments. It's a rare fusion of the dragon's strength with the attributes of wood.
Okay. Okay. I didn't realize there was wood dragons out there.
It's changing your answer to what the year might bring.
I thought I knew what this year was going to be for me until just then.
Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. So I will say that despite Kellen's protestations, I will continue doing the BG Stats goals. And again, patrons will already know, I think I mentioned which ones I'm doing for next year. So there's that. Those are still up and running and have been since January 1st. The other goal is I actually want to try my hand at designing a game. This is something that I have been kicking around a little bit in my head for the last couple months. You play enough games, you see things you like, and why not try your hand at making one? This is not going to be like a full-time job thing or anything like that. But there is a part of me that, if I never try designing a game, I think I'll be disappointed. So I'm going to spend some time on that, I think, this year.
What is a genre of, like, again, I'm not holding you to anything.
Yeah.
Let the inspiration guide you, and
yes.
You were just inspired by the wood dragons.
I was.
If you just let the inspiration guide you before you knew about the aforementioned wood dragons, what would this game be? Would it be a Euro? Would it be a fighty game? Would it be?
Well, I think I'm going to start with.
Is it going to be a solo game? Or?
I'm going to start from theme first. So I'm looking at sort of like the history of monks. And I'm just kidding. No, I actually have been sort of like kicking around ideas for a little while and have some mechanisms that I like. I guess I'm starting from mechanism first and working theme into it. But just
trick taking.
That's right. I was so upset when I heard about Skulking the Dice game because it really. But no, listeners of the podcast will sort of have an idea of what things I like. I like the idea of games that have time tracks. I think there are not enough games that have time tracks in them. And I think they're almost always done pretty well and always fun additions to games. So something like that. And I don't really want to pin down any things. Maybe it'll be a Patreon podcast. Maybe I'll hold myself accountable and sort of have the community join in by making it a regular podcast where I talk about where my game design is going. And maybe, who knows, take feedback or who knows. But it's definitely something that I'm, despite me sort of being wishy-washy, do feel like pretty serious about giving it a go this year.
I like that idea. Like, I think that we've mentioned this once or twice on the podcast, but like Kellen and I dabbled in this very briefly before the existence of the podcast, and it kind of brought to mind to me just like how legitimately hard a process it is, and how much can go wrong with a game design that you will never anticipate until you play test it.
Right.
It was a very, very insightful process.
And to that end, I've already scouted out a couple game design groups in the area. There happen to be a few, so we'll see where that goes. But it is a like real thing that I want to try to do.
That's awesome.
I think that the best answer I can give for this is like a very deliberate intentionality around playing games with specific people, and I think that that's something that's like easy to say and something that I feel like is a soft goal every year. But I think more so than ever this year, for a whole host of reasons, I kind of feel very ready to, at any given point, grab someone and say, let's play this game. Let's find the time to make this work. Let's actually schedule this time in, which is something that, is a fairly recent addition to my life, the idea of like calendarizing things and scheduling things in advance. And I would like to make a point to do that with board games. And particularly in the context of like playing games with Kellen and Christina, especially whenever Mark is around, I would just love to like say like, let's make a hard plan for this to happen in the near future. That's really the kind of the beginning and the end of it. Because I think the thing that ends up happening, and this is what it ends up leading to this problem, as I alluded to in my, failed resolution, is this soft idea. It's like, oh, if I keep this game here, I will sort of get the sense that I need to play it. But no, if you don't make an active plan to get this stuff done, the reality is that that's something that just won't happen for me.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, one sort of big paradigm shift, I guess, that I've had in my thinking of games is like, I would have games and wait until I had the exact right player count or exact right things and try to have things line up perfectly for things. And I was able to, for the most part, shed that like last year or the year before. I can't remember when exactly. And just say, you know what, this game is best at 4, but it's okay at 3. I've got 3. Let's just play it. Let's just do it. And I found that I'm breaking through that mindset and just like getting games played has been great. Often you're not losing that much when you're less than ideal circumstances, and you're getting these games that are often, really fun, and you've heard they're really fun, and you know you want to play them. You're actually getting them to the table. So yeah, anything to like get games played, be it organizing or just playing in less than optimal circumstances, I think is a good thing.
I think that's right. And I think that I can recognize very specific instances where exactly what you described kind of bore out for me towards the end of last year, which is where this sort of really started to cement in my brain. Like, I had been hanging on to Eclipse 2nd Edition for this idealized scenario where all 4 of us would play it. And, that is a very hard goal to have happen for a game like Eclipse. Like, it's just too big. It's too hard to say, like, hey, let's dedicate the 5 hours we have today at this convention or the Dice Tower West to play this game. So instead, I took another group of mine that was like more adjacent to like other maybe less heavy games. I said, literally, like, okay, 3 weeks from now, you guys, we're going to put this in my calendars and play this. And that is how I got my first game of Eclipse 2nd Edition played. And like, it was very eye-opening of just like, oh, if you actually just commit to doing a thing with a specific date, with a specific group of people, it's actually more likely to happen. And that was very cool. Like, I have folded Blood on the Clock Tower into something that I have every 2 weeks, a sort of hard commitment to play with people at work. And I'm mostly acting in a storytelling capacity in that sense. But, like, it is still just, it's a big deal to, like, have something that I know recurrently every 2 weeks on a Wednesday, I will be playing Blood on the Clock Tower. Like, I've just been appreciating that so much.
That's cool. I think my goals are in line to some degree, like are a little even more ephemeral than Mr. Neilan, who can be more specific. It's like, unless you wanted to keep going, Neilan.
Sorry. No. I was 100%
okay.
like, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it translated into my thoughts, but I wasn't. It's like, I use board games for social interaction, but I'm not convinced that the last few years have borne out social interaction as an outcome of playing board games. And so it's sort of like, in a perfect world, or at least what Christina and Mark and we would always talk about, best case scenario is every Saturday night, all 4 of us are just playing board games together. And now, now that Mark has, shacked up with the people of Vegas, the Bunny Ranch, I've never been, I wouldn't know, but ask Mark, that the best case scenario would be me, Neil, and Christina playing 3-player once a week. But I'm not 100% sure that is actually my best case scenario. Again, that would be amazing. But I wonder if that wouldn't be like every other week. And what I mean is, like, I used to use board games to like meet people and there's an element of play or jovial get to know you that's attached to it. And for whatever reason, I've just not had that experience more recently. We did a Barrage Con where there are people you know and don't know, and as well, and you're getting to know them over the course. So I'm trying to reassess social situations as it relates to board gaming. So I've been trying to get a game night with coworkers set up, even just a one-off. I did a game night over the Christmas break with Christina's family friends, and it was like 90% not gamers, and we played Green Team Wins. And it was lovely, as Neilan would say, because it was just 12 people who don't play board games playing Green Team Wins and getting really mad at each other. I loved it, but it was get to know you adjacent. And this is self, not necessarily all the circle circumscribed to one great whole here, but like I need to figure out how to be a little bit more social this year, and I think that board games are my path forward. But I'm reassessing. Like that could be a game night, I don't know, where we invite more people that we like but don't hang out with that much. So I think it's related to Neilan's like be more intentional. I'm just not sure what form that takes, but I do know that like my social output is like not there as it relates to board games, and the answer isn't just, I don't know, play more board games. Like there's a different element to it somewhere here that I can't quite, I don't know if I'm touching the pan yet. My fingers aren't burnt.
No, I like that. And I like the idea of, it's a half of what I'm saying, but in almost like a different direction, which is like be more specific and intentional about like how you want to incorporate board games into your life rather than like the specifics of the people and the games, which I think is great. Yeah. It is, again, something I think that you and I talk about a lot, about like how we get back to that sense of like what got us into the hobby in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. And totally separately, I do want to play more games on BGA, and I think there's a good range for me, and it's like 3 games at once is my thing, but I just like didn't play basically any this year. So if you want to do that, hit me up on there. I am currently playing Nar. Is that a game? Nar. Wizard, the only true and living game, Wizard. And Samarkand, which is no, that's a real game. It's an old Sid Saxon classic, Samarkand.
Okay.
I'm sure I'm saying that right. And, I don't know. It's the micro and the macro, the alpha and omega, as it were. It's all one eternal round. Let us go straight to the navel gazing here at the end. I think people may have been expecting 100 from each of us to add up to 300. But here we are at the end of this. How are we all feeling? What's the thought for BGB in 2024, the Wood Dragon year?
I don't know. I feel like there are peaks and valleys. I think there are times where we feel, especially, I think we've mentioned on the show, I'm sure we have, that one of the big impediments is like trying to make sure that we are giving the audience interesting things, and part of that is coming up with interesting show topics, and that can be stressful when we've done, 300 episodes at this point. But I find that the Christmas break, even though we do the top 50, and that is also it's a stressful thing in and of itself, but it does give me a little bit of a refresher, some time away to miss talking to you guys and coming up with these things. So I always find myself like optimistic at this point. I think there's a lot of ways the podcast can go. I think there's a lot of like interesting things we can do, and so I'm looking forward to all that. Obviously, it's also aided by the fact that Dice Tower West is coming up in the not too distant future, and obviously seeing you guys is one of the highlights of the year for me, so that's something that I'm also looking forward to. So yeah, in terms of more concrete things for the podcast, we got a lot of positive, I think, comments about the Designer Spotlight episodes, and those are ones that I'm always happy to do, and I like doing sort of the deep diving and research on that stuff, so we'll be doing more of that, so that's going to be fun. Misty's made an appearance.
She's eating one of the Pac-Man bad guys. Yeah.
But yeah, looking forward to it. Always optimistic. Do you have all the Pac-Man, or just the one?
No, that's the only one I could afford.
Anyhow, feeling re-energized and looking forward to what 2024 has in store.
Yeah, I think for me, like, I forget the timing of it specifically where we switched to doing like the 2-week schedule. This is like not necessarily looking forward to thing, but the thing that I am feeling really good about is like how much I think that has improved our ability to keep on top of things while still feeling like it's maintaining like a healthy position in our lives. And I think embracing that as like, the time frame for the year kind of gives us a lot of room to, like Mark said, use the time in between to more accordingly think about very specifically what each episode is going to be, and in terms of like very deliberate with the topics and the features. And I think that's the thing that I'm the most looking forward to in the podcast is it's kind of just like embracing the new structure for like maximum potential in that sense.
Navel gazing. I would like to formally declare that I am willing to sell Board Game Barrage, and all rights to the Tanky name mark to shut up and sit down for $45 and a copy of Dominion Alchemy. New in shrink. That's
Perfect.
all I have to say.
That's a legally binding contract.
I do declare. I think that for me, there is sort of the mastery. There is the like what you get when you make 30, and so the sort of the 0 to 30 and the skills and the technical skills that it takes to do something 30 times, and then really like the 10x from there. It's on a whole other order of magnitude where it's like we've now done this for 5 years or
6
more?
years almost. Yeah, practically
it's
6.
Absolutely insane how much our lives have changed over the course of that time. And, we're still in a position where we can keep making it. But I would say that for me, the goal or the hope or the want would be to be more experimental in the topics that we're willing to do. I want to bring back guests this year, which is something we haven't done in a couple of years. Unfortunately, it just takes time. But it's like I would love to start a record with a topic, but one that is terrifying or has some sense of like, I don't know how it's going to go, or it might actually be bad. And I think that in a lot of ways we've, taken those away intentionally, episode 0, which no one will ever listen to. No one can ever listen to. But, just wanting to find the ways to make that process fresh, because it's sort of like it's a great way to even just keep up with each other. We have the board games and we have the non-board games and the Patreon, which I think works really well, even just as like a life update for us. But it's like, I don't know. I think Mark's goal of designing a game is cool too. And is there other ways to use BGB as a brand? I know we've talked about making a convention, and that keeps not happening because we need a business manager. Again, $45 and a copy of New and Shrink, Dominion Alchemy. Give me a call. Quinn, Matt, Tom, Pip, you could come. I'll listen. If you can negotiate the rights, you can have them. So yeah, I think where possible, get weird. It's funny, and it's related to even work, which I won't be too specific on, but it's sort of like I go through a yearly process, and what I crave now is a little bit of weirdness, or how do I deviate from these processes or these sort of things that I've set up or things that I know work, but want to try to do things in a different or interesting way. So that's where I'm at with the show. I think the every other week thing also makes it super sustainable. So that's great. You thought it'd be over at 300, but you were wrong. The only one that can stop this is, again, shut up and sit down, $45
yeah.
and a new and copy of Dominion Alchemy. And that is going to do it for the 300th episode of the Board Game Barrage podcast. You can email us at boardgamebarrage@gmail.com if you have ideas for how to make the show weirder or more different or more interesting, or if you need my shipping information for those aforementioned money and items. You can find us on Discord at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord. You can talk to us on Board Game Geek if you want. You can find us anywhere you want. Thank you so much to Heart Society for their song, What's on Your Mind, Kid? I wish it was a different song, but I was outvoted 2-1. Thank you to Mark and Neilan for putting up with me for 300 episodes, and Christina, who's put up with me for many more years than that. Thank you to anyone who argues with me in the Discord. Thank you all. Have a good evening. We made it to 300. Here's to 300 more.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
You guys can hear me?
Out.
Yep.
Yes.
All right.
Oh,
Hello.
Mark, you're still coughing.
No, it's pretty much gone. That was
Okay,
rare.
okay.
Are you guys trying to up the 300? Is it a moment? Hello and welcome.